with the 3 Black Docs. We are glad you are here. We need this. You guys might need this too. So go ahead, grab your drinks, and we'll come back and get into it. All right, welcome back. Dr. Karen, Dr. Zanetta, I saw y'all were wanting to say hey.
Yes. Hey. I like our new intro too. Podcast. Dropping live every Tuesday.
3 Black Docs.
Yes.
Right. And so this
is on Amazon now, right? Amazon. We're now on Amazon as well. Podcast.
Right.
Just had to throw that out.
Wherever your podcast, you get your podcast plus Amazon now. We have a new episode every week, and we're up to 20 episodes. We released the 20th one this Tuesday. So thank you, everyone who is listening, commenting to us that maybe you got a colonoscopy or maybe we've scared you to death. Either way, the information is out there, and that is what we wanted to do. So we have a special guest in the house who is somewhere backstage, but I think will be released. Tanya, come on out.
Hello.
Tanya Hicks in the house, everyone. And we'll get into who Tanya is and what she does. But for now, of course, we want to hear what everybody's drinking and how everybody's doing. Just so you guys know, Tanya and I go way back. We met in undergrad as freshmen at Tulane in New Orleans. We've been friends since then. We pledged together. We were line sisters. We were roommates, and we've been friends for over 20 years, which is dating ourselves a little bit, T. But nevertheless, she is a nurse case manager in Syracuse, and we're going to talk about some things that have happened on her end since COVID hit, and some information for all of us to use for ourselves and our families. But before we get to that, I want to know 2 things. Obviously, what is everybody drinking and how is everybody doing? Because it has been a week. There is a lot going on. Obviously, people are coping with it differently. I really haven't been too cheerful until I saw you guys' faces a few minutes ago. So I'm so glad that we get together like this. It is part of my coping mechanism for sure. Just to say how crazy it's been. Our last time we went live that night was when Chadwick Boseman's death was announced. And I remember because we had gotten off and then like an hour later, that news came out. Of course, we had the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. May her memory be a blessing.
Notorious RBG.
And,
what in the world?
And the decision or non-decision about Breonna Taylor. So there's a lot going on. So let me know, let us know in the comments, what are you drinking? How are you feeling? How are you coping?
So, Tiffany, what are you drinking? We haven't even gotten to the drinks yet. We're 5 minutes in. What you drinking?
Right. Red wine. Cab.
Red wine. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, let's let our guest Tanya, what you drinking?
I'm drinking a sour apple wine cooler in my Giants cup.
A sour apple.
I'm lightweight.
I didn't know that was a thing.
It is a thing. Respect it.
Yeah, okay. I'll respect the color. Dr. Z.
They don't give you respect, Tanya. They don't give you respect. So just to piggyback.
I'm going to earn it.
Yeah.
So just to piggyback on the week, I mean, this has really it's been not only a tough week, it's been a tough year. And so, I was on call over the weekend and it's just been busy with the kids in school. And today I was able to spend about 3 hours outside, just sitting outside and, doing nothing that I had to, without responsibilities, which was really nice. And so I actually feel really good. I'm excited. And so into this, I'm bringing my different cup, but I do have my red and white straw.
Oh gosh.
Which symbol, there was just my red and white straw if we needed, if we needed to pull it out for
It's
any
okay, as
reason.
long as we went first. We went first. It's okay.
Yeah, and so
Ivy.
you know, just in case, I may have to put on a
We're
jacket.
family.
May have to put on my
Oh,
jacket as
wow.
well. But we'll see. We'll see if we have to.
We'll see how it goes. How
We'll
about
see.
that?
It's
We'll
okay.
see how it goes.
I
We'll
am
see
so
how
glad
it
I
We're
goes.
good.
changed the color of my
We're
shirt.
good.
What in the world? Okay.
Dr.
So,
Karen, what you drinking
so
and how you
I,
feeling?
I am.
What are you drinking, Dr.
So
Karen?
this has been a very interesting week because Ashley and I had a very short vacation. We went to Kiawah Island. Thank you very much, Dr. Tiff, for the recommendation. In South Carolina, it was absolutely lovely. Really only spent 2 days there, and it was good, but it was also very reflective because, as everybody heard on the last live, I've made a life decision to change my current employment status, and my last day is coming up very quickly. So my last day at my current institution is actually on Wednesday, and it's coming with some emotion, which I wasn't prepared for, not emotion for leaving the institution, but emotion about the decision-making process, and that this is my first time making a decision for myself. And those of us who have careers, oftentimes we make career decisions based on what our family members need, or or something else. And this is my first time making a decision for me, and that's a little scary.
Right.
But it also brings up a lot of emotion about the fact that it is just me, right? Because my
Right.
husband passed away 2 years ago. So I've had a lot of that. I had to talk to my counselor while I was at the beach. I'm like, okay, I need a mental health break. Where my girl at? Found me a Black counselor. Oh my God, love me some Carol. So it's lovely to have a Black counselor, let me tell you, because you don't have to explain anything. I could just go, she was like, okay, I hear you, right? It's lovely. So because of all of this, I actually decided I'm going to drink some water tonight. And
Okay.
I'm staying hydrated, and I'm going to keep my brain lubricated. That's what I'm doing.
Amen.
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 Amen with the brain lubrication.
Amen.
Yes.
Yes.
I did my
Kudos
water
to
chugging
counseling. How
and
about
my
that?
workout
Absolutely.
today.
Kudos to counseling. Kudos to counseling.
Yes.
We love it.
Yes. Yes. Please normalize mental health.
Normalize mental health.
Yep.
Yes. So back to what we're doing today. So we got Tanya Hicks in the house. As we said before, go way back. She is now a nurse case manager up in Syracuse. Tanya, tell everybody what that means.
Sure.
To start, what you do on a day-to-day basis, and then we'll kind of get into what we're going to talk about tonight.
Sure. Case management in general is the coordination of services for anybody, whether it be in the hospital, the community. And so in the hospital, in my particular facility, nurses do that coordination of services. And the goal is to be able to discharge you safely from home. And in the community, case management services can be the coordination of services to keep you from continuously coming to the hospital, which some of us know that that's a problem. So we assess and apply resources and have a lot of interaction with families to be able to discharge them home safely. And so we have issues with that on a regular day and on a regular basis. But then when COVID hit, it made it even 10 times worse.
Right.
Can I just say that I'm just really happy to have another New Yorker on, because I'm not now the person who's speaking the fastest. So kudos. Thank you very much. Just saying.
I didn't notice because I'm so used to it.
Yes.
I
And
didn't
I do
notice.
actually tell people that. I tell people that all the time. Can you tell me if I speak fast? Because I'm from New York and I speak fast.
Yep,
So,
I do
yes.
too. I'm right there with
Shout
you.
out to Long Island. Long Island representative.
Yes.
Both
What?
of them. Both of them. Tanya did a short foray into New Orleans,
Yes.
the highlight of her time.
Oh,
But,
whatevs.
And
now
I'm
she's
going to
back in
correct one
Syracuse.
thing. Tiffany,
Yeah.
I'm going to correct one thing. Because yes, we technically did meet freshman year, but our relationship didn't actually start until sophomore year on the infamous videotape of Showtime, the best of
Showtime at the
Showtime at
Apollo.
the Apollo.
Excuse
Correct.
me? Okay, we need some deets on that.
No, the people
So-
are here to hear about COVID. So that's
I love the
what we're here for.
deflection.
So we'll get back to
I'll tell you
Showtime
later.
at the Apollo at a later time. Right
Uh-huh.
now, the people
was
are
epic.
here
We
to
need
hear
some-
about
Uh-huh.
resources.
Somebody may
So
tell you
yeah.
the story in the comments. But yes, go ahead.
yes.
I'm happy to
but
be here, by the
anyhow,
way. I'm blessed to be
The
here.
reason
Thank you.
she is joining us tonight is we were talking about a month ago, maybe a little bit more than that, just about healthcare and everything else. And she was telling me how a lot of what you guys and I have been talking about with people delaying their cancer screening, right, because of COVID, and what we think how we think that's going to impact cancer, after this is over. But she was saying they're seeing the same thing, that people who have chronic conditions like congestive heart failure, angina, any kind of heart disease, are not coming into the hospital, delaying treatment. And then when people are being admitted, they're showing up much sicker, right? And then on the other end of it, there's issues with placing people, right, because of COVID and the pandemic. So talk a little bit about that, Tanya.
Sure. And, as you know, I'm in central New York, so our situation was a little bit lighter than in the New York City area. But, there are diagnoses that we know of, that continuously come to the hospital, and we do everything we can to try to give the resources. So when COVID really first hit, when we got our first case, it was like the world shut down, and we didn't know what was up. We didn't know who was open, who was doing what. And essentially we had to go on a hunt, start calling people. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you seeing people? And so then when our numbers really kept going up, nobody was showing up to the hospital. And that made us really nervous, because we knew that there were people sick in the community that desperately needed us, and they just weren't coming. So the people who were coming were pretty much those in the emergent cases. And that became alarming to us, because we already had people in the hospital that we were planning on discharging. And then when we got our first cases, it just felt like everything just bust loose, and we didn't really have a gauge on who was doing what. So it was very frustrating. It was frustrating to families, that now all of a sudden nobody can visit the hospital. Nobody can visit the nursing home. So imagine having to make any decision for your loved one, and not being able to be there. So it was just frustrating to everybody across the board. And we did the best we could, but it's slowly coming back now, that a lot of people are now going back to appointments, because our numbers haven't been as high. Before good, maybe I would say 2.5 months, a lot of people were not seeking care. And Tiffany, if you remember, on one of our sorority chats, somebody said, is everybody still getting mammograms? And everybody typed in yes, 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 because we couldn't afford to have people miss those appointments.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, that's important to make sure. I think we had talked about it on another call or another podcast, where there were some estimates that up to 80% of screening or there was an 80% reduction in screening. And that's really problematic, particularly for Black communities. We've got to make sure we're staying on top of our screening. And, there are lots of safeties in place. There are lots of, when it comes to mammograms, they're doing all kinds of cleaning, et cetera, making sure they're spacing people out to do cleaning. Colonoscopy can be a little bit harder in terms of getting in for procedures, depending on what type of institution might be near you. But please make sure that you are getting your screening. We cannot afford to have late diagnoses in our community.
Right. We cannot afford more disparities in care. And so, Tanya, what are some of the things that family members need to know? Because we know that, family members aren't able to come to the hospital the way that they did before. And so if you're concerned about your loved one, what's something that you would advise? I mean, what should we be telling our family members who may be sick and who may be in the hospital? How can we advise them?
Nowadays, our hospital is open, but for a shorter period of time, and it really isn't as flexible as we used to be. And so we're doing a lot electronically. And so here comes the digital divide, that really keeps people away from, the information. And so ultimately, we just need you to talk to your providers in any way possible. And so if there can be a Zoom meeting with providers, if you can't make it, send a representative, to the hospital. But the limitation of visitation really hurt families, especially for those who were essential. Some of us were still working. And so it was already hard being able to come into the hospital for a meeting that we set up. We like to do everything on our schedule. But if you were essential, you couldn't get that time off. That was very difficult. So I think just really having communication and amongst families, and really talking about, when do I need to go in the hospital? Like, what is going to, happen that I need to present? And when I do present, who's going to help me make decisions? Who's going to talk to the doctors? All of those things. And we said we'll talk about that stuff later. But it's really about discussion.
Right.
Dr. Zanetta, you're probably the only one of us docs who's actually seeing inpatients right now. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the resourcing? I can certainly tell you about incidents that I had with a family, post-COVID, but can you tell us a little bit about some of the resourcing that you're providing for your patients, and their families during this time?
I mean, I agree with you, Tanya. It's been really difficult, and so in my clinic, we still are not allowing family members in our clinic rooms. So I've done all kinds of conference three-way calls, FaceTimes, met people in the parking lot. In the hospital, we are letting one visitor, for a limited amount of time. But it's difficult, and one of the things that's really difficult is if that family member happens to be very sick, and you are really trying to find out what is it that they want, what is it that what would they have wanted in their care. And so it's really nice if someone in the family can designate, like Tanya said, a representative, so that we have a go-to, and you want to have their contact information, because we've had situations where we can't find a family member to contact
Yes.
to
Oh,
say
yeah.
what's going on.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I cannot tell you how heartbreaking that is when someone shows up 2 days later,
Yeah.
and we just didn't know what was going on.
I know I talked to you about one of my friends from elementary school, from middle school, whose husband was diagnosed with lung cancer, and he also had a stroke associated with that, or some sort of traumatic brain injury associated with it. And they were not allowing, this is in New York, and they were not allowing any family members at all into the hospital. And the team would come and have a conversation with him, and he couldn't remember
Right.
what was going on. He couldn't. So I'm trying to figure out, how are the teams even trying to make decisions? And so, Tanya, you may have had some experience with this, where you do have patients who are disabled or unable, to speak for themselves. I mean, what? I mean, I know hopefully things are better now, but were there any resources around that?
Yes. So our particular facility had iPads, and they were able to use the iPads to show, what people look like and have conversation both with the patients and the physicians. And personally, I have a relative that's in assisted living, and we only got 15 minutes, I think, a week. But what they did do is they allowed us to give them an iPad that we could use to see our loved one multiple times. But in the hospital, nurses don't
Right.
have time to do
No.
that all the time. So years
Right.
ago, I used to, giggle because Tom Joyner used to tell everybody, have a day, take your loved one to the doctor day. And I never really understood how important it was until I got in this role. Because honestly, I think one of the issues that we have is that people don't really know how sick their loved ones are. And so
Yeah.
when they get in
Yes.
a
Please
when they
Yes.
get in a hospitalized
Yes.
situation,
Yes.
repeat
they feel
that.
like
Honey.
where did this come from? She was walking and talking just fine. And so we
Mhm.
have an
Yes.
iPad. We're praying over the iPad. We're talking
Right.
about the delivery of services. We're asking about decisions to be made over the iPad. And sometimes it worked, but it was just frustrating. I think it was frustrating for
Yeah.
everybody. It really
Mm.
Right.
culturally it didn't do well for us as a
Right.
culture who normally when you're in a hospital we like to show up.
Right.
So it's
Yes.
Yeah.
been difficult.
Right.
But iPads have worked.
What are some ways that we can plan ahead? I know there's something that
Mm.
comes up in the hospital that's advanced directives.
Yeah.
And so, usually we people get nervous when they hear that. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, and maybe what are some ways some families can plan ahead? Because in my family, actually, we had a conversation over the weekend with my parents, and it was the first time we had ever done this,
Mm.
just about things that we would want, things that my parents would want. And that to me was a breakthrough. It really was a breakthrough to have that conversation, and it just prompts future conversations. So we said, you know
Right.
what, we're going to follow back up on that, and we're going to start talking on Sundays just about what it is that we would want. And I think that's really important. So how
Excellent,
do you
excellent idea.
encourage people to plan ahead? What are advanced directives? What should family members be saying to each other?
And before we
Sure.
do that, can you guys let us know in the comments, have you had these discussions in your families?
Mm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, no,
And if you
just
do have
curious.
Please.
advanced directives, what
Hmm.
are they? Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So
Go
advanced
ahead.
directives. Advanced directives are legal documents that are put in place so that a person can appoint someone to make their decisions for them in the case that they can't. So if you have some sort of catastrophic injury where you're unable to make your own decisions, there's a person that's available, a person or persons. You can identify one person and then identify another as an alternate. And so these are legal documents that are in every clinic, they're in every doctor's office, they're on the internet, they're in pro bono legal clinics, they're at hospitals that you can get a hold of. And the importance of them is, a lot of times families don't know your wishes. So I applaud you, Dr. Z, for having that conversation with your family, because that really is the first step. Having a conversation about, if you weren't able to make a decision for yourself, who would you want to do that? And appoint someone who you know is going to carry out your wishes. Appoint someone that you know is available, willing and able. I'm somebody's alternate healthcare proxy that I didn't even know about. So have the conversation. It's more than just appointing somebody. Have the conversation. And so that's just one of the things. And we tease people all the time and say, hey, at Thanksgiving when the whole family's together, those elders need to say, listen, here is where my documents are. Like, it doesn't have to be this family meeting, and it can be very much informal. My documents are in a shoebox. My dad's documents were in a shoebox in his bedroom. My mom's documents are on her in her top drawer. Find out who has life insurance. Find out who has all of these different things. And I used to tease people all the time, because every day in the hospital, we would have something happen to not necessarily an elderly person, a middle-aged person like us. And who knows where your Social Security card is? If one of us was a veteran, who knows where their veterans paperwork? You can't talk to any entity without having a representative, on Social Security and things like that. So really going over your family members and going through things with a fine-tooth comb, have the discussion, appoint somebody, and then, you can really start talking about the financial part, which hurts too. We've seen so many families fall apart right in front of us because of issues with decision making. And I always tell the story. I walked into a gentleman's room when I was at the bedside. Now I pretty much handle a lot of complex patients, but I walked into a gentleman's room to see him who was going to surgery, and I'm doing my assessment questions, and I made the cardinal mistake and assumed that the young lady that was at the bedside was his wife.
No, you didn't.
So rule number one, don't do that. So
don't do it.
She gave me that look like no, because I was like, "Are you Donna?" And she was like, "No." And she was like, "I'm the fiance. I'm the fiance." So the patient said, "That's my wife. Can you please take her off my records?" And I said, "Oh, sure. Who would you like to, put on as your emergency?" And then I said, "Hey, by the way, you're going to surgery. Are you interested in having a healthcare proxy?" And he said, "Well, what's that?" So I explained it to him, and he said, "Well, why would I need it?" And I said, "Well, if you were not able to make decisions for yourself after surgery, I'd have to call your wife." And he said, "Tell me where to sign."
Yes.
A disenfranchised.
Yes. So Dr. Tiff, there have been lots of folks who said, yes, they've signed docs, they've had the docs, but you look at Melissa's comment, so what would you recommend, Dr. Tiff, on how do you approach the conversation?
Well, I think there's a gauge, right, on, you got to know your family and their communication style, I think, and you just got to put it out there, and it's not comfortable, right? Like, nobody wants to talk about this stuff, but it's a necessity. And as you were saying it, Tanya, I was thinking about how the cultures are so different about how we talk about these things. So when I was a resident in Philly, one of my good friends when I was a resident is German. She was German, is German. We're still friends. And she and she was very open and was like, "Hey, here's all my info. If something happens to me," her whole family was back in Germany.
Right.
And she was like, "You're one of my closest friends here. Here's all my info." And I was like, do I know you like that? Or like,
it doesn't matter with you. I mean, you invite yourself to people's strangers' weddings, so come on now.
And I have gone to strangers' houses for Saints games, but that's another story.
But that's different.
You can tell that was a cultural difference, right?
Yes.
Because we, like, even in our own families, we're not that open about it. right?
Right.
And so this does get to a lot of like, what is your family communication like? Tanya or
Right.
Zanetta, one of you guys, hit on a great point, which was a lot of times people come into the hospital and their family doesn't even know how sick they were to start with. So imagine
Right.
this, and we've all had this.
Right.
Now you have someone in the hospital whose family doesn't even know how sick they were. They can't make decisions. There's no healthcare power of attorney or proxy. And we
Right.
have been in those situations
Yes.
so many
Yes.
times.
Last weekend.
Let me tell you
Last
something.
weekend.
I could not imagine doing inpatient right now in COVID and then people not being able to come in the hospital even
Yes.
and have these conversations face to face.
So let me just
I can't
answer
even imagine that.
for
So,
Melissa. I just want to say
yes.
one thing to really be able
Back to
to
Melissa.
start the
Hey, Melissa.
conversation, though. I just want to give
Yes.
her a tip, right?
Yes.
Because these are hard
Melissa's a
decisions.
soror.
Like for me,
Very
I'm a doc, so I said to my daughter, "Here's my papers." Like
right.
Ashley knows where all my stuff is. My husband and I sat down.
Right.
It was like all matter of fact, right? Like boom, this is
Very.
what we're doing. But
Yes. Yes.
sometimes what you can do is use other people's tragedies to start the conversation.
Yes.
Right.
And what I mean
Yes.
by that is somebody might be in the hospital or somebody may be passing away or something like that, or you might see them struggling, right? Death in the family. Use that. And I know it sucks, but sometimes you have to use those situations saying, you know what? They went through some stuff at the end of their life. We need to, what would you want? What would you want to have happen? If you were to go into the hospital, what would your wishes be? And kind of utilize other individual situations that you might hear about, or even look, Chadwick Boseman was 40 something years old, right? When he passed away.
Right.
It's like, wow, this can happen to anyone at any time.
Correct.
What would you want to happen, for you,
Right.
if you were to get sick? Let me tell you what I would want. So even starting with yourself. I mean, I know we're young, we're all young. Yes, we're all young on this
Of
call
course we
today.
are.
We're all young. But still having those directives, even at our age, is really critical because we don't know.
Oh,
We can walk
yes.
outside and get hit by a car. So it's really
Right.
important, even for us as younger individuals, not just our parents, but have those conversations with our family to start it. That would be my
Right.
Tanya,
And I think
that was
COVID,
great. Oh, go
right.
ahead.
And COVID has been a great example because I
Yep.
mean we've all known
Right.
people who have passed away
Yeah.
from COVID and
Yes.
All
people of
ages. All
color
ages.
Yep.
Right.
are
All ages.
dying more.
Yep.
So this is now, I mean, it's so important. You're at everyone's at risk at this point.
Yep.
So
I
And people
would
are still
say,
dying of natural causes too. People are still having traumatic,
right.
injuries and still having traumatic incidents. So that part
Sure.
of healthcare hasn't stopped. And so when we often always think about our elders with doing the advanced directives, and that's important too, but we really need to do it ourselves. And really, I didn't have a full conversation with my family. I just say, here's where this is. With my parents, I actually started the conversation because our local health department had these stickers to go on the refrigerator that said, my documents are here. And I just sent them to them. I don't know what they did with them,
Oh,
but I
that's a
sent
great
them.
idea.
And then I started following up. And I was telling Tiffany this funny thing that during my training, it just popped up in the conversation that we were having during my training somewhere, either in nursing school or when I was at the bedside as a bedside nurse. They told us to keep your healthcare proxy and your advanced directives in the refrigerator, because if it were a fire to break out, that maybe the refrigerator would be like the last thing to go up. And so truthfully speaking, my fireman buddy said, if the fire started in the kitchen, everything's going up. But, technically, it could happen. But the funny thing is that I didn't know is that in trying to figure out, was this true? It actually says that EMTs sometimes will look inside your refrigerator because they're looking to see if you have insulin, and they're looking to see what medications that are in there. So somebody may open up your refrigerator. So what a perfect place to put it. And I got my mom like a little dry erase board. Mom, put your
I think
date
that's a
of birth,
really great
put your
point.
allergies. Yeah, put your date of birth, put your allergies, put what hospital
Right.
you want to go to, stuff like that. And those things are like really important, like little quick things. And I think nowadays people are really starting to see that they need to pay attention to it. My mom was with a group of her sister girlfriends, and she lives in a senior like apartment complex, and one of them just dropped. She just dropped, and my mom picked up the
Wow.
phone and called her granddaughter because she just happened to have her number, and that granddaughter was able to talk to the EMTs. They didn't know her birth date, they didn't know her allergies, they didn't know what her health history was. She dropped right in front of them. And so when the ambulance came and took her
Wow.
away, those sisters, my mom and her little cronies, sat down and said, let's exchange numbers of our children, because if
yes.
something were to happen to us, if
Yeah,
something
that's a good
were
point.
to happen to us,
That's a
we need to
great
be able to do that.
It's a really good
Come on,
point.
And so
Marguerite.
I was
Yes,
so
with the
proud.
good
Yep,
tips.
Marguerite.
Yes, on it.
I was totally,
You know it.
I was totally
That's
like
her mom.
they knew it. Yes, Marguerite is my mom, by the way. So
Oh, okay. I was like, "Where's Marguerite?"
Ooh.
yeah,
Hey, Kim.
Marguerite's in Mobile, Alabama.
Mhm.
Okay.
Kim
Okay.
is one
Yep.
of our other crew from Tulane. We'll tell you about that
Yes,
story. We'll
ma'am.
get to it later.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
tell you. Yeah, in my story, I'll tell you about it.
yeah.
Yes.
Are there
Are there
specific
specific?
advanced
Yes.
directive forms that need to be filled out? And do okay,
Yes.
this is
And
for
yes,
you,
they might.
T.
I sure will. So, in New York, we have the healthcare proxy form. We have, you can do a living will. You can do a power of attorney. In some states, the names, are interchangeable. So Tiffany was talking about a medical power of attorney. In her state, that's what may be equivalent to a healthcare proxy. And the healthcare
Right.
proxy is the person you appoint to
Mhm.
make your decisions only if you can. So if you're alive, well, and kicking, you don't have to, call on that person. It's only in like a hospital setting if you cannot. And the power of attorney where we are is more of the financial documents. And when I was served on the trauma service, I saw countless, like every day, people would get into a really bad accident, and the breadwinner is the one in the accident who paid all the bills. The wife's name
Right.
maybe isn't on the mortgage, isn't on the car. Guess what? You can't call those people and say, "Oh, I want to pay," and they don't have your name.
Mm.
You can't do it. So you need those documents, especially I would say in a marriage with home and children, because it's protection. They would have to go to court to be able to get your assets and things like that to be able to pay off your debt. So those are really important. And then I have a simple will, which is a living will, which then explains all of my wishes, what I don't want, what I do want. After a matter of time, I want this. And it also even talks about who, if my son is under the age of 18, who I would like to have care for him and who I would like to handle his financial affairs. And I was able to get all of that. If you're unionized, which I am, my union had a simple legal plan that was $35. And I got all of those things done for $35 with lawyers signing on them and them having a
Mhm.
copy and all of those things. You could get them
Yeah.
for free.
Mhm.
Most hospitals may have a relationship with pro bono legal clinic, your county health departments, like all of those things you could get for free.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point, is to check, with the hospitals. So I know that I'm watching, there was someone, I can't remember who it was, it just scrolled up, but was saying that they're having a difficult conversation with family members right now who are in the hospital, sick dad, about getting the power of attorney, et cetera. And the hospitals actually have services. So hospice services will help with that, and oftentimes will provide the notary services for free. So they will come and they'll provide the documents. And I know people don't like that term hospice. So you think about palliative care, hospice doesn't necessarily mean someone's going to die tomorrow, right? It's just a
Right.
matter of if your loved one is in the hospital, and even if you're not there, even if you're not able to physically be present, to have the hospice and palliative care service, or actually at Wake Forest, it was the Faith Health, right? It was what do they call those folks? The
Yeah,
chaplain
yeah, the
services. Yeah,
chaplain
chaplain
service, the
services
chaplain
actually
service.
would take care of it at Wake. So just ask if you have a loved one who's in the hospital, even if you're not there, ask to see whether or not there's a chaplain service or even palliative care services that can help fill out those documents for your loved one. It's really
Yeah,
important.
I
Mm-hmm.
can't see the comments, but I think the second question was,
Yeah, I
is
need to
it
put my
different? Is it
glasses on.
different by state? And
Mhm.
it might, and I can give you an
I think it
example
does.
because
It
Yeah.
does.
yeah, for us, we have the Family Healthcare Decision Act, which outlines the priority of who we go to in a case that you can't make your own decisions. But I was in another state for one of my siblings who was ill, and they just selected me. And I was like, this is not how this works. This is not how any of this works. And I was alarmed to find out that their state may not be specific. And so they probably can't. It just said family or representative.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
didn't feel strong just not making decisions on his behalf, which I knew he would probably want me to do. But my parents, at that time were still alive and well, and I just didn't feel comfortable. So I made them call. I made them call my parents. I made them call my other brother, and I made them say, "Oh, I don't want to make decisions. We're gonna defer to her," which doesn't always happen all the time. And we have a joke, at my hospital back in the day, we used to say when people didn't have the advanced directives, here come the Leica family, and here come the fiancés. And so the Leica family is everybody showing up saying, I'm like a brother. This is like my father. I'm
Wow.
like a
Yep.
sister, this
Right.
person. And we love you. We know your family. We know culturally, for us, family is more than blood. But tonight, like today, you're not it. And we love
Wow.
fiancés.
Not
Fiancés
today.
matter.
She
Yeah,
said,
fiancés
not
matter.
today.
Fiancés matter, but we
in
like
full
wives.
disclosure, she has gotten some of those calls from me of like, girl, what I'm supposed to do with this? Like, I'm gonna call my
Right.
case manager and get them here because I
It
don't
is.
know what to
Yeah,
do with this. Like,
Hashtag
Yeah, and
fiancés
like,
matter.
fiancés matter.
and I say that
No, they don't.
because people come in
Okay.
and they think it's an elevated status, and sadly
No.
enough,
It's like,
there are people who do
so
have
what?
It's not
wives
a
and
legal. It's not a
fiancés.
legal
You know,
status.
so, like,
Well,
on a
yes.
good day, some people have both. They have husbands,
Mm.
wives, and fiancés. So, and we have to deal
Mhm.
with that too. So, shout out to all the teams in the hospital that have to deal with all of that.
All the hospital
Yes,
teams.
yes. And
We
can I
all feel
Can I
it.
just share some with y'all too? Because I see a note, and I don't know if that's Tamani. You might be talking about this.
Hey,
Let's talk about-
Tamani's another
Hey,
one of
Tamani.
our
Okay,
group from college.
let me just say. So she's
she's
putting all kind of
Ashley's,
goodies up in this,
soror.
in the chat box. But let me
Ash,
say, so she's
Tamani's
talking
your
about
soror.
estates, and let me just tell you something. I had the unmitigated gall to think that having a will is going to simplify things.
Oh,
It
No,
doesn't really. So it's a
no.
piece of paper that
yeah.
needs to be signed and needs to be legal and that kind of stuff. And it
And
does
you need to
help
have
to
one.
state kind of what your wishes
Right.
are, particularly if you have kids. If you have kids,
Yes.
Dr. Tiffany, Dr.
Come-
Z, if
I
y'all
have
have
my
children,
papers. I
get
got
the
my
papers,
estates.
right? I'm just
Right.
I got
saying,
my
in
papers.
general,
Right.
if you have children, you must
Yes.
have a will because that helps to dictate who's going to help care for your children, et cetera, should something happen to you and your spouse,
Right.
whatever, right?
Mhm.
So that's an important component. But let me tell you, when my husband died 2 years ago, I literally just closed out his estate. And the man didn't even have a whole lot. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what the heck? There was
Crazy.
so much paperwork. And, because he didn't have a whole lot, I didn't hire lawyers. I probably should have to do it. But I mean, I tell you, it was just a hot mess trying to gain access to bank accounts and other things. So do have these conversations with your significant others. Now, I knew my husband was sick, and we had talked about, you need to go ahead and transfer some of the stuff to my name. Did we do it? No. So I'm just saying, don't wait. Get it
And you
done. Have these
Dr.
conversations.
Karen, you have access. You have access.
You
So
know what I'm
imagine someone
saying?
who doesn't
I know
Yeah.
have
better.
access. And
Yes.
they come in the hospital and they're
Yes.
like, "Can you call Social Security for us because you work for the hospital?" No, ma'am, I cannot. Social Security
No.
don't want to talk to me.
No. Exactly. And
That
folks
happens
think that
all
just
the time.
because
That happens
you're
all the
No.
time.
you're
Yep.
somebody's child that the stuff is going to pass automatically down. No, you got to put all this
Okay,
paperwork
now
in place.
you go into the fight that I'm having with my parents right
Oh,
now.
boy.
Okay, because I'm an only child.
Mhm.
I
Okay.
have a will. I have a state set up. I have a binder. Okay.
Me too. I was
And
looking for my
this is
binder.
for whoever asked. Somebody asked earlier,
see.
like, how do you approach the conversation? I also think, as younger people, you
binder's
need your
downstairs, Ash.
papers too. You trying to show your binder, Karen?
I was
Oh,
going to
she-
show my binder.
yeah.
I got my whole
If
binder.
y'all
Actually,
show
Go
out
ahead.
your binder, I'm gonna show
Mine
I
my
don't know what I
whole
do with my
planner.
binder.
probably in here.
Shout out.
Where y'all pulling out binders?
But here's my point.
Go ahead, T. I'm sorry.
What was my point? Oh, here's my point. Yes.
Your
So
folder,
Binders
your
too,
binder.
wasn't it?
maybe you are more comfortable having this discussion than other people, right? Like we're all oncologists, Tanya's a case manager. We're all really comfortable with these ideas of having
Very.
this stuff in place. So
Mhm.
so I approached it as like, I showed the binder to my parents and my cousin and was like, here's my binder, and it has a sad face on it.
Thank you.
If something happens or I don't make it back, like the first page is like sad face if I don't make it sad face, and it has all of my stuff in it. So I figured since I had it, I could say, all right, now do you guys have your stuff together? Right.
You were trying to start the conversation. You were using
Right,
that to
right.
help. I see.
Right.
And
I tried to, but I have not yet been successful because my parents are like, you're an only child. You get everything. I was like, you still got to write it down.
gotta write
Yeah.
it down. You
Yeah.
gotta
Still
write
have
it
to
down.
Write it
Yes.
down.
So my child, as you know, is an only child. So look at my binder,
And I have
right?
an only child too.
Right. So I
I'm
have
an
my
only child.
binder. And let me show you this other piece. So this is the piece of my binder that I had to get replaced. So it's important. You have these directives. It's important to go back and review and revise, right?
Right.
Yes,
So
that's
make
true.
sure your
That's
paperwork
true.
is up to date.
That's
I
right.
originally had my estate done in Massachusetts, but when I was here in North Carolina, I had to get a few
Oh,
things
that makes-
changed and
yeah.
edited.
Yeah.
But make sure you review your documents.
How
And
often would you recommend, Dr. Karen?
I mean, I would say every 5 years at least, or when
And
circumstances
that's what I've
change.
heard. Yep.
You know,
Okay.
so for instance, my
Yeah.
husband passed away. So I was like, all right, I guess I need to look at this stuff again. Right. And
Right.
I'm like, I assigned who to be my what? It was crazy. Right. But it's also different because Ashley's older now. Ashley's an adult. So she can be my healthcare proxy versus
Mm-hmm.
when we first started this process 10 years ago, she was young and she probably would have still been fine because she was been around medicine her whole life. But I didn't want her to have that sort of responsibility.
Right.
Even if I say, pull the plug XYZ, that's a hard thing for a young person
Very
to
hard.
have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Very
But
hard.
Dr. Karen, I'm gonna put a letter in your mailbox, as me and Tiffany say all the time. You have that binder; it's beautiful. I have a home planner who, by this organizational guru, a sister too. So I'll share that later. But if something were to happen with that binder, you need to have those copies somewhere else.
Oh,
So
I
Anthony
actually
needs to
have it
have
on a CD. So it's actually on a CD
excellent,
and it
excellent.
actually is on its remote as well. So I paid extra
Yes,
money to
Dang.
have it so that it is electronic in a safe, and my lawyer actually has it.
exactly. And the reason why I say that is because
I
Tiff,
don't have all that.
Look, I was
but
like,
how
I need
much
to
did
step
our
up.
family?
I just got
No,
beat.
but
I got
think
beat
about
in
it.
my own
Think
Tanya,
about
you
it. Your
won.
by
family,
my own
yeah.
line sister. That was
Think
rough.
about it though. Your parents are in the lovely hurricane capital of the world, and my
Yes.
mother's very
Thanks for reminding
nearby.
me.
And
Yeah.
and things happen, and documents get lost, and they get tossed, and they get swept away, and they get
True.
burned. And so
Yes.
Right.
have copies
CD.
elsewhere. Give copies. Have email it out. Share it. Do whatever you have to do. Take a picture of it. Years ago,
Oh,
we used
that's
to
a good
even just
idea.
have, like, on the flip phones, we used to put
Right.
ICE, in case of emergency, and that at least
Yeah.
let the healthcare
Ah,
professionals know. But now the iPhones
that's
are
actually
all,
good.
you
I
can put a emergency contact and a star. But we did all those things, and
Hmm.
put some in your refrigerator. I'll say.
All right, I'll put a packet in my fridge.
Don't put that big old binder.
No,
No,
no.
but
So
imagine
what?
just not having all of that,
Yes.
and having to deal with it. It's awful.
But I think a lot of
Yes.
this also has to do, I mean, we talk about the fact that we oftentimes don't have these very difficult conversations, but
Yeah.
sometimes we don't even have conversations that are less difficult, like family histories. So,
Right.
Right.
talk a little bit about that, Tanya, because it's really important, but how can we even start that discussion?
So during COVID, one of the things that I picked up on, I had started some years ago, but I picked up on ancestry. And we have a documented history on my mom's side, but like none, zilch, nothing on my dad's side. So I, struck up my ancestry.com account, and I started, expanding the tree to include everybody. And sometimes you look up on a document that, may be some sort of civil, like civil service document. And then you don't know how they died. And I collect obituaries, and that's something that my cousin and I are doing. I don't know if Val's on, but we are exchanging obituaries, which is another important part. But one of the things that I started doing was realizing, what did these people die of? I don't know my grandparents. Like I
Mm,
don't remember my paternal grandmother. She died when I was very young. So I had no idea that she died of kidney disease. I had no idea. I pulled my
Mhm.
grandmother's death certificate. One, because we didn't know who her parents were, but she died of a stroke. And so now I know that those are two things in my
Mm-hmm.
family that we need to work at. And so for me, it was sort of by accident that we find out. But people think it's really crass to ask what did they die of. But in a family member, like especially a direct family member, we need to know these things. Young people need to know. And so you do need to know what your grandmother had, and what was your grandmother's name, and and what did they die of. And a lot of times they don't know. My mother didn't know her grandmother's name. Like, she didn't know her
Right.
mother's. They never spoke about it. And so she had no idea what her name was. She had no idea what her mother died of.
mm,
Like, we had
mm.
no
Uh,
idea. I had no idea that we had a family plot. So when you start like really going through the history of your family, start dropping the gems like, hey, when did they die? Oh yeah, she had this, she had that. And it comes out really naturally. And we had a family Zoom. Everybody's doing the birthday Zoom and stuff. We had a family Zoom, and we started talking about history. And I found
oh,
out
that's great.
that a distant relative, Vivian Malone, was one of the young ladies who integrated the University of Alabama. And that is my distant
Wow.
relative. And we were like stunned. And, while we still have our elders, we need them, on this to sort of shed light. And my mother is the
Mhm.
youngest of 15. My mother's the youngest of 15, and she's the only one living. And so she doesn't know what half her siblings died of. But it's just really important to have those conversations and collect those obituaries, do ancestry, because I think you start finding out a lot. And once you start having those conversations, people just start telling you stuff. and
Mm.
I
Yeah,
had
that's
no idea.
true.
You had no
Yes.
idea.
Right. Right. And also from a physician perspective, like in cancer, now there are so many cancers where, your family history is incredibly important, right?
Yes.
People who have metastatic prostate cancer, we're doing genetic testing for them now. We weren't doing that before.
Mhm.
So it's really important. So I advise patients like, hey, you may have this. I need you to let your family members know about it. And if there are
Mhm.
questions, they may need to be tested as
Mhm.
well. So Tanya, I think you're bringing up a very important point.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah.
incorporating this into your family reunions, into your family Zoom meetings, just to
Mhm.
say, you know what did Uncle Joe die from?
Mhm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it just starts the conversation.
Right. And shout
Yeah.
out to Monica Lynn for talking about your diagnosis with your family and with your kids. That's really important. I'm also looking at Linda Smith. She's, saying
Oh,
that
hey,
that
that's Tamani's
COVID,
mom. Hey, Miss
young
Smith.
Yep.
young
What's
people
up?
young people are vulnerable, right? And so
Yes.
it's important, all of these things, making sure that you have this
Nope.
information, that you're
I
having these
promise you.
important conversations to know how you want to be taken care of. Because remember, COVID is no joke. You're going to be
It's
intubated,
not.
so it's a little bit different. And we know that people can recover, but it's important to have these conversations now. Tiff, you were going to say something, my dear.
I forgot. Oh, I remember now. I was so excited to see Tamani's mom.
I know. I
Um,
feel like this is a reunion for us.
I know it is. Tanya, you had said that somewhere along the way about having the Thanksgiving dinner, but I was saying maybe we like in this era of Zoom, all of our more seasoned family members know how to work Zooms now and stuff from
Yeah.
from birthdays and whatever. Maybe it's like a Zoom to talk about like your healthcare proxy and your wishes. The other thing was, I think it was Kim that asked somewhere like where the forms are. I wanted to say back then that there's a lot now online too of like simple wills, like Legal Zoom, and
Yeah.
there's another
Yeah.
like Mama Bear legal forms, things that like you can look online and get a simple will at least to start for like a
Mhm.
couple bucks.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we have.
Um,
I gave Ashley a thing called a peace of mind booklet. She could probably put it in the chat, and it's something that
okay.
it came out in a booklet set, and I actually gave it to my parents. I sent it to my parents as a guide, and it just has it's forms. Who's your doctor for this? Who's your doctor for that? What funeral home would you ever want to
Mhm.
Oh
choose?
yeah,
Because
that's
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 very
great.
important.
That's good.
That's very important for us.
Yeah.
Yes,
What
Yeah.
have you
because
had it
they
set
have to do the
aside?
body
Who's
right.
doing the
Oh
body?
yeah,
Who's doing the
Yeah.
who
body?
got it?
Y'all,
Who
this is
got it?
more
Who's
Who
doing
got
the
the
y'all
body?
body?
look. People are already telling us we're
Ooh,
Don't
scaring the
cremate me.
oh,
Burn
we
crap
do a
out
me.
of
good
them.
job.
Dadgubbit.
Like,
No,
They don't do a
we
good
need
job with the body.
listen. We need to normalize this because all of us, have children, and guess what? We
Right.
did that elaborate birth plan. We did that elaborate birth plan for the hospital. We did make your death plan, make your end of life plan, make your
Yes.
family plan. Go
Right.
ahead,
come
normalize
on.
it.
I
That's
didn't make
true.
a
We
birth
all do.
plan. My birth
You
plan
didn't?
was like,
He just showed
no.
up.
I
We
was
just
like, get the
Does that surprise you about Tiffany? Come on
deliver
now.
the
No.
baby and we're
yeah,
both
no.
healthy and that's my birth
Yeah.
plan.
I think I
Well,
was
I
at work
made
for
one.
both
I
the days
digress.
of both of mine.
Yeah, I
I
was
made
too,
one, but it
running
was
around.
wrong. Yeah, I made
So
one, but it didn't happen. Like it didn't happen the way it was.
yes.
And I saw Celeste, hey Celeste, the social worker extraordinaire who hooked us up with Jamil
Oh
Rivers.
yes,
She
we were talking
said,
about her.
Yes.
Yes.
and I think Ash popped it up about the 5 wishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
What does
Something like
anybody
that.
know what that is? What are the 5 wishes? Celeste, do you know off the top of your head? Let us know because
Yeah, let us know. We can put that in the
yeah.
comment section.
Yep.
Somebody else had mentioned having a shared Dropbox with your family members, or
Oh, that's
that's
good.
actually
That's
That's
excellent,
really
or
good.
like a Google
an
Doc or
Right.
excellent idea.
Google.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Use the
that's great.
technology that we have to make your
Yes.
lives easier, right?
Yeah.
And just go ahead and get it because most of these documents can be electronic. And I love, Tanya, you talked about your job. That was the other thing. I didn't realize that my current job actually has a legal services, and you
Oh,
pay I
Kim.
paid $23 a month or something like
Okay.
that, and they'll create all of these documents for free. So
Yep.
find out what your employer may have. You might not even realize it, so that you don't have to worry about, am I filling this out the right way? Just get it done for your state, and you'll have it on file. Look at
If you
this.
Um,
do
The Tamani's
travel,
State
yeah,
Department of
that's
Health.
a good one,
Okay.
Monty.
All right, great.
Yep. If
Hmm.
you
oh,
do travel, we do all have
okay. I
most
didn't
of
know
us
that.
now have have electronic medical records due to the Affordable Care Act. But But when you have the electronic medical record, whichever one you use, there is a capacity for you to check off so that your stuff can be shared. So that if you wind up going to a different hospital that you're not used to, or if you're out of state, out of town, whatever, we can click a button and find that. It's not an all out assault to find every family member using all the tricks of the trade that we have to do that. And if we have to do it, we do. But there are simple ways. So don't say no to having your information shared, because you just never know. We have in this area snowbirds, so people go to Florida for the winter and they come back, and so they literally
They're
have
coming.
yeah,
They
they
go
have
to see
They're
Dr.
coming.
Z.
After
That's
the
right.
winter is
coming.
taking care of them in Florida.
yeah,
Right. And
yeah,
I don't know
Covey.
what's going
With the
on.
Covey. She got Rona
Right.
right there
right,
too.
That's
Right.
right.
so
Right.
just make sure that you can click those buttons, and so if there's an emergency situation, we'll have access.
Tanya,
Go
can
ahead,
you
Tiff.
talk a little bit about, another piece? And I'm looking at the time. We only have 10 minutes left, even though Ashley hasn't said that yet, but I see we have 10 minutes. So we had talked a little bit about the problem with patients with a lot of chronic illnesses like cancer, that you see cancer patients, you see ICU patients in the hospital, very critically ill people, and the problem with them getting the healthcare services they need upon discharge, right? And what
Sure.
that is what has happened in terms of like the rehab facilities and the nursing facilities, right, with COVID. If people have family members at home who need like higher healthcare needs, where can they go to kind of get like home healthcare in place now, or how do they find those resources? Because we were talking about that being another issue here.
Yeah. And there are a lot of resources too that are underused, especially in our area. But if you are hospitalized, that's where I come in, and that's where the social worker come in, and we can set those things up. The
Yeah.
problem that COVID hurt, and you shared the article today about staff. There was a time frame where we didn't know that there was asymptomatic spread. And so there was testing and PPE for hospitals, but the nursing homes and home care agencies didn't necessarily
Right.
have those. And so a lot of staff people got sick, and a lot of people either had to quarantine because they maybe were with someone who was sick. So that decreased the nursing shortage even more.
Right.
And if you look at nursing homes in general, they're severely understaffed. So when COVID hit, a lot of them had to close admissions. So we didn't have a lot of
Yeah.
places to send people, which
Yeah.
also keeps people in the hospital longer, which is never, exactly a great thing for us or them. And so when it was time to get home, we ran into who can do what. Families were stepping up. God bless them. People who have never been caregivers before had to become caregivers. People who had, been caregivers couldn't get the respite and the breaks that they needed, because those services were being taken place in nursing homes and also other agencies. So my best advice is to have a discussion and do an evaluation of your family and ask who can do what. In the
Mm.
case that we're all thinking this is the second coming is on its way, there we don't know when it's going to happen. Who can do what? Who can really do what? People were outright not wanting to go to nursing homes. They still are outright not wanting to go to nursing homes. We have to do testing before they go. There's still no visitation in the nursing homes that I believe is going to start opening up next week, but there's some stipulations to how you can go about that as well. And we have a nice handy dandy list of all the states that aren't supposed to come to us without quarantining for 14 days, so that even
Including
difficult,
North Carolina.
including North
Yay!
We
Carolina.
made the
So
list. We made the list.
yep.
Florida.
So my advice for families is to have conversations. If I was to go to the hospital, who can provide what? Should I go into a facility that where you can't visit, or maybe have limited visitation? Should I come home and try to, max out as many services as I possibly can? Once these budgets are going to be, once these budgets are going to be cut so bad, we don't know what services are going to be available.
No, it's
But
true.
your county health departments should have Office of the Aging, and they should have a lot of services available. But those things should be looked at now. There are a lot of resources where families can get paid to take care of loved ones, but it takes 60 to 90 days to set up. So a lot of the services that we have available, it takes forever to set up, and it's not something that I can set up from the hospital. So start looking into those things now. Your primary care physician should have information. If you're in the hospital, we can give you information. Your county health department with the Office of the Aging. And I think something that's really underutilized are support groups. people don't know that if you have a dementia or a cancer or different things like that, the American Cancer Society has a lot of funding that can help with transportation to and from radiation, because that's one of the issues that we have with people leaving the hospital needing radiation and chemo. That was already a problem,
Yeah.
before
Right.
COVID, because of
Well, the
expense,
challenge with
because of
COVID is
transportation.
a lot of the transportation is being restricted now, though, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
So at least
We
in
had
North Carolina, we've had restrictions of both the Komen and ACS.
And
correct, and
remember,
we had ride
radiation
sharing
is every
companies.
day, for
Radiation every
folks who
day. It
listen. Yeah,
requires a staff member to go with you. And
right.
during COVID, you can't supply that staff member. So that patient is in the hospital now getting all, 85 radiation treatments. But we had ride sharing companies that wouldn't come to our hospital.
The
Not
Sorry.
shade,
85.
the
Come
shade.
on
I
now.
saw it.
Not 85.
I
That's
give
not
it
what we
33.
do. Okay,
I
that's
give it
better.
around 30. 30. But yeah,
No,
ride
she
sharing
meant what she
companies weren't
said.
coming to the hospital. Yeah, I didn't mean that. Really.
I know it.
Out in
Uh,
these streets.
all those things, all those things. So, again, discussion is the ultimate step, and then that leads to everything else. And I've given my card out to many of people who have called me months later saying, I remember you helped me a lot. What about this? What can you tell me about this? But people don't go to support groups for their diseases, and that's where a lot of stuff, a lot of ideas, and a lot of like aids that are privately paid, that are good, they share all those tricks of the trade of services, and I don't think they're utilizing
Yeah, we
enough.
need to talk about that though, because I tell you, when I was in Boston and was trying to set up support groups for Black folk, they did not want to do it. They didn't like
Who's
the term
they?
support group. A lot of the patients,
They.
a lot of the people
The
in the
patients didn't
community,
want to do it.
patients in the community, when I would go in this community, they did not like the term support group. So I would try to
Right.
couch it as an educational group or something like that. But I
Hmm.
tell you, these big support groups that are with Comb and that's where those resources, that's where they're talking about those support groups.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
I don't know how we need to overcome that. I'm surprised you
So
haven't
I'll
come
tell
across
you,
that, Tiffany. I could
yeah,
not.
Mm.
Oh, you have
there's
Tanya?
a
Okay, because I'm like,
oh yeah,
Tiffany's like, who? I'm
in
like, I can't have
Syracuse.
my Black patients don't want to do it.
Years ago, I don't know if it's still active, but we had a thing called the Genesis Health Project, and it was through Syracuse University School of Nursing, which I'm a graduate of, but the school is closed now. And we went to the barbershops and the hair salons, and we went everywhere, educating about prostate cancer. And we had the bone marrow transplant crew that came, and a grant paid for all the testing. And we went to the fraternities and sororities to try to get more, Black people on the bone marrow transplant list. So we went to them. We didn't call it a group. We just found them.
Mm.
And so those are the hair
Mhm.
salons and the barbershops are really good opportunities. And churches. Churches are always somebody knows somebody who knows somebody. We have elder fairs here for seniors, for services. We have health fairs. I used to be president of the Black Nurses Association here. We and get
Mhm.
information such as this. So even if they weren't getting it for themselves, they were getting it for somebody else.
Mhm.
Mhm. We have the 5 wishes here. Tamati. Oh, I didn't see what Tamati said. So, okay, the 5 wishes are
Encouraging.
here. Sorry, Tamati, didn't see what you said. The 5 wishes. Thank you for putting this out here. The person I want
Yes.
to make your decisions for me when I can't, the kind of medical treatment I want and don't want, how comfortable I want to be, how I want people to treat me, and what I want my loved ones to know. This is great. Thank you,
Yeah.
the First
Mhm.
Family
And
Lewis,
that is a beautiful
for
family.
putting this up. Yes, and we love your
Yes.
pick. Thank you so much for adding
I
that
couldn't remember them. I couldn't remember them all. So thank you.
to the comments section. Well, I didn't know what they were. So,
Yeah, I didn't
but
either.
this is
Hadn't heard
this
of
is
them.
Yeah,
the
no,
point,
I know them.
and especially when you're talking about folks who, do have complex illnesses, really to take care of people well, it really is a team effort, it's a team sport. Like everyone, plays their role. And so when Tanya Kemp was like, girl, you gonna talk about this stuff for an
We
hour
need to. We need to talk about it
and
with
we
younger
gonna
people.
listen because, this is the role that, you guys play so well in taking
Dr.
care of our
Z,
patients. So
Dr.
thank
Z
you for
talked
that.
about how you guys as providers can be more impactful, and
Yes.
I will just say that you give treatment and you do give great treatment, but you can also say, in addition to giving the treatment, that in the case that this course of treatment is no longer effective, why don't you start thinking about what you would want to do? And it
Right.
doesn't force people to do it, but it gives them the option that we need to have conversations many times, and I'm sure you guys see it way more than I do. People are still talking about the treatment you offered them 7 months ago, and
Yeah.
now
Right.
the loved one is in a totally different state and can't receive
Yes,
treatment.
Right.
that's
So
Well,
right.
So it's interesting because I think a lot of oncologists in particular don't want to have these conversations up front if it's a de novo diagnosis because they want to give hope. But let me tell you something. I just learned that there was a young researcher, young woman diagnosed with breast cancer, Black woman, who just recently died, complications of treatment. Okay. So it's something that we as providers have to think about, that it's not just the disease that can kill people, right? Or harm them or cause, trauma. We have to also know that our treatments can also cause damage too. And so it's a way that we can think about things, and you don't have to say it, just say, in the event something happens, who would you want, to help care for you? It's a way to bridge it versus saying, if the treatment doesn't work, you may have to, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to couch it in a different way.
No, right. And I agree with Tanya. I think you have to start ahead of time and prepare people. This is the plan. If this doesn't work, this is what we'll think about. If this doesn't work, I really want you to think about what it is, because my treatment may not be effective at that time. So, it's important to start early. But I tell you, it really helps when you have those family discussions earlier.
Yes.
I promise you, people can spend their last days a lot better.
Yes.
A lot more peaceful, a lot more, without as much pain.
Yes.
If we can plan ahead of time. So I think that, Tanya, I completely agree with what you're saying.
I think that's a great point to wrap up. Our hour is up. Tanya, thank you so much for joining us. I think
You're
this
welcome.
was.
I didn't get a chance to tell.
It was great.
Such a great discussion.
She did it purposefully, you know that.
At the end of the day, you guys, we need to just have our families in the loop about the reality of the illness you're dealing with, the seriousness of it, what your need, what your wishes are. Like, we just need to start having these conversations. Please. You can follow us on Facebook, wherever you get your podcasts, and Amazon. We got 20 episodes. We got a colon cancer episode that we released back in June. Before we even heard about Black Panther. If you guys want to know about colon cancer screening, it's there. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Our last 2 episodes, 19 and 20, were with Jamil Rivers, who is an outstanding breast cancer patient advocate, and is talking about the Living Beyond Breast Cancer symposium that is coming up in October for Black women and men with breast cancer and their families and caregivers. It is free. And it is online, and they are meeting every weekend in October. We were so thrilled to do some of their educational content. Thank you for that. It's on our Facebook page, so head on over there. I'll tell y'all the showtime at the Apollo story another time.
The other podcast that you may have missed. Go back and listen to the podcast that you may have missed, like the mental health in children with the schools. That part, those 2 parts were my favorites.
Thank you, and we'll let Erica know.
Me. I appreciate it.
That's what a lot of people say. Erica was their favorite, but we won't
go there.
Fine. We're not going to
we're not going to talk about her right now.
People say we scare them, but that's okay. T, thanks so much. This is awesome. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you back here in a month live. Until then, listen to the podcast. Tell a friend.
Whoop, whoop. Bye, y'all.
Bye.